This is the My Campaign Coach podcast, where we talk about how to win elections. Every week, we let you hear straight from the best consultants, operatives, and candidates in the game, all for one reason, to help you win. For more information about how we can help you win, visit mycampaigncoach.com. Now, here's your host, Raj Schaefer.
Welcome to the How to Run for Office podcast from My Campaign Coach. Today we're talking with Wendy about campaign messaging, leveraging earned media, and how to improve your public speaking and debate skills. Before we get started though, I want to make a quick request for all of you guys. We're working really hard to create awesome content every single week, but we need your help to spread the word. Please make sure you've subscribed in iTunes and leave us a rating and review. That does a lot to help other folks find us, and it makes us feel pretty good about ourselves as well. Make sure you've also liked our page on Facebook because we do a lot of stuff beyond the podcast as far as blogs and videos that we're putting up there. Now back to the important stuff. Wendy Day is president of For Better Day LLC, where she works in public relations, training, and political consulting. She has an exhaustive political resume that she'll tell us a little bit more about. But we most recently worked together when she served as the Michigan State Director for Senator Ted Cruz's presidential campaign. She's also run for office for herself, so she knows more about campaigns than most folks, and she helped found the Michigan Tea Party, so her experience as far as issue advocacy and working within the halls of the State House is quite extensive. One of my favorite things about Wendy is that she really exemplifies that idea of being a happy warrior. Whatever may be going on, and she's had to deal with a lot of crazy this year, I've never seen Wendy get rattled or lose her cool. She's been equanimous to the core and has done a great job being an example for her fellow conservatives. I'm always excited to get to talk to Wendy, and I'm pumped to see what she can teach us about messaging, earned media, and how to improve our debate and speaking skills today. If we're lucky, I think she'll also talk to us about the book she's working on. With that, Wendy, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm so glad to be here, Raz.
Well, it is a pleasure. You're a little bit colder up there in Michigan than we are here in Texas, but my experience going to Hillsdale College up there has made me feel bad for you guys. You got way too much snow on the ground. And I'm enjoying Texas a lot more than freezing my butt off up there.
Yeah, Texas does sound pretty good right about now.
We're hovering somewhere just north of freezing, and we're all griping about it. So yeah, we're not quite as strong when it comes to the cold. Now, tell us a little bit more about your background. Kind of walk us through how you got involved in politics and the winding, crazy road that's brought you to be here with us today.
Yeah, it has been a crazy winding road. I actually, through college and after was a Democrat, a liberal, pro-choice, feminist Democrat. And it really was a process to become a conservative. I became a Christian and started reading about American history. And so really found my way to conservatism, slow and steady, but the roots are deep. And so that really has, I think, helped keep me grounded as I've moved forward in my political career and my political experiences. So after college, like I said, I slowly became a conservative. And back in 2004, my first kind of jumping into the political world on the Republican side was the George W. Bush campaign. My husband was actually getting ready to deploy to downtown Baghdad. And I remember thinking, I'll be darned if he's going to have John Kerry as his commander-in-chief, when he's deployed. So I worked every day on the President Bush campaign. It was a great experience. I did a lot of volunteer work and coordination, and I worked with homeschoolers. And then after that, I got involved in my local party. And then I pulled out a little bit for a while. And when I came back, I actually helped start the Tea Party movement here in Michigan. We held the first Tea Party rally in February of 2009, and then, of course, had a big rally in April. Worked in issue advocacy for a year and a half. And then again, God kind of pulled me out for a while, and I spent 5 years working with families of soldiers who've died as an Army contractor. And in that time, decided to try to run for the House. So I ran for the House of Representatives in Michigan, lost my primary by 400 votes. But, I had to go back to my job, which was kind of like going back to an old boyfriend at that point, which was hard because my heart had moved over to the political world again. But even though I love my families dearly that I was working with, but even working with those military families helped to really ground my principles, ground my patriotism, ground the idea of country first, because I saw firsthand on an everyday basis the cost of freedom. and it's very personal, and I've seen it up close, and it's hard. So I came back after that and ended up running for vice chair of our Republican Party it's a statewide elected office, and then was tapped to do that Senator Cruz campaign and be the state director here in Michigan, which was a fantastic experience. We had amazing volunteers from across the state and built really an incredible team. So and now, after that was over, I worked on a sheriff's race. I'm doing some issue advocacy again, and kind of on God's good humor. Obviously, I told you I'd work on a book and seeing what comes next.
Well, I definitely know a little bit about God laughing at your plans, because he's laughed quite hard at a lot of mine. But that's quite the incredible story and quite the incredible background. I didn't know that about your work with the military, the Gold Star families. That's really awesome. How long did you do that?
5 years, and I'll tell you, it takes a toll. We go in. Everybody knows the two soldiers knocking on the door, and then they're there and they present the folded flag. And after that, about a month after that, we go in and provide long-term support for the family, making sure they have counseling, all of their paperwork's in order, they're getting their benefits. I organized and ran 3 camps for weekend retreat camps for our families, and did a lot of really creative, good things for them to help them heal and move forward. And it was a great experience. Like I said, it really grounded me, looking at folded flags and baby pictures and crying with these moms. I think that's something that every person who cares about public service or wants to be in public service should experience at one point or another, because, like I said, it makes everything real clear and simple and real.
Man, that's hats off to you, Wendy. That's really incredible, and I'm glad you got to do that. That's a beautiful thing to do for our men and women who gave everything.
Yeah, it was an honor.
Appreciate that. Wow. Well, moving on to talk a little bit more about, tell me a little bit more about your time on the Cruz campaign specifically, because I know that's the last place that you and I directly interacted, and you did a really amazing job on that campaign. And let me give a little bit of background to some of the listeners. Guys, when you're looking at a national campaign especially, there are some states that are quote unquote more important than others, and there are a lot of states that get high priority, and there's some that may not have as many dollars or resources put toward them. And there's a tendency, a sad tendency among a lot of people that manage those states, like Michigan, that don't get a ton of resources necessarily sent to them by the national campaign, to really just gripe and moan about it. And instead, what Wendy did was she took ownership of that situation and said, you know what, the reason why we don't have all that many resources is because they have to go other places. And so what I'm going to go do is I'm going to go out there and I'm going to go kill what I eat, kind of thing. I'm going to go hunt this stuff down. We're going to go find the resources we need. And she did an incredible job. What she accomplished with the small number of resources that she was given was truly amazing. Tell us a little bit more about that, Wendy.
Yeah, and it was such an honor to be able to have that freedom, really, to be able to go out there and see what we could do. We didn't know what we could or couldn't do, so we just did what everything we could think of, and we had a great team. We had a statewide team that was meeting a year before our primary. We all met and had a training, and we found those captains and built, like I said, a statewide network. And we didn't wait for things to come from the campaign, because we knew they were going to other states. So we actually, what they reported as spending in Michigan from the campaign was about $1,500. Now, to put that in perspective, John Kasich spent $2 million in the last month before the campaign, and we still beat him because of our grassroots work. And Cruz had not been in Michigan for 6 months before the primary, until the night before the primary, because we were neck and neck for that second place spot. He came in the night before the primary. He was supposed to get there at like 7:30. They called me at noon and said, "Can you put together a rally tonight?" And I said, of course. And they said, "Okay, call us back." And at 12:30, they're like, "Do you have a place yet?" And I'm like, "Okay, give me a second,
It's been 15 minutes, guys. Come on.
It's been 15 minutes, right? But and Mark, how tough he is. He's like, "I want it now."
Oh yeah.
And so we put it together, and we got the word out, and they're like, "Well, do you think we get like 300 people?" I'm like, "No, I think we can get more than that." And we ended up with like 1,000 people that showed up, and his plane actually had trouble, and he had to get a different plane. He didn't get to the venue. Now everyone started showing up about 5:30. The doors opened. He was supposed to speak at 7:30 or 8:30. He didn't get there till 11:30 at night. And we were able to, I was talking with the guys in Houston, and they're like, can you get a band to come entertain them? And, we had a DJ, I had a song list on my phone, that we were kind of playing to fill the time. And we ended up working with the venue to just bring in pasta, which was the cheapest thing we could think of. And then, so we put pasta stations and just had water. And, very few people, I bet maybe 24 people left, even though they had to wait all that time. And at midnight, we had a huge rally in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and it was fantastic with very little notice. So, really, and that's because we built that team and took ownership, and we did a lot of creative things. The campaign, they really did put the word out to us that if volunteers are doing things, even if they make a small mistake, we want them to take risks. And if they make a small mistake, then, most of 99% of that's going to be forgivable. We can fix it. And if they're volunteers, it's a volunteer thing. We can't control them anyway. So they gave us a lot of leeway and a lot of freedom that way. Now, we made sure that everything we did was legal, moral, ethical, and honored the spirit of the campaign and would not harm Senator Cruz. And I was a happy warrior. And I appreciate that you saying that about me, because I try to be, and I'm not always. I just try to not do it in public when I'm upset about something, but but I tend to be a happy warrior by nature, and that was what our team was instructed to be, and that was the tone of the culture of the campaign in Michigan. So we were able to do a lot of really crazy fun things. We did. In November in Michigan is hunting season, deer hunting, rifle season for 2 weeks, or just whatever, shotgun season or whatever they're using. And we went, they have these buck poles. I don't know if they have this in Texas, where probably not, 'cause it's so hot down there, but everybody brings their deer and hangs it up at the township hall, and they have a big competition to see who has the biggest one.
That's cool.
And we actually ended up going, and we were at 3 or 4 different buck poles. We had special banners made, and the volunteers just paid for them and did it as an in-kind donation. So I just told them, I said, who wants a banner? We had banners made. I fill out a form, send it in, and Sportsman for Cruz, and we had special flyers that we made. And we were at 3 or 4 of those buck polls talking about the Second Amendment. And, we did a Christmas campaign that wasn't directly campaign related, but it was a pro-life campaign using the slogan, one unplanned pregnancy changed the world. And of course, people say, well, it was planned. Well, ask Joseph if he thought that was planned, But it was a great pro-life message, and a powerful pro-life message. And we just put "Merry Christmas" from Ted and Heidi Cruz, made the signs like kind of a purpley blue and white color, and actually, the pro-life, Genesee County Pro-Life had 15 billboards in Genesee County that had the same slogan without his name. She asked if she could use the logo because they liked it so much. It just didn't have Ted and Heidi Cruz. But everywhere else, the signs had that. So we did several Christmas parades. We did a live nativity at the Capitol with that banner for Ted Cruz, and for 2 different nights. And so we just did a really, even in November and December, did a lot of really creative and fun things to help kind of get the word out and build that excitement. Because if you don't give your volunteers something to do, I mean, obviously, they're not going to stick around.
Well, and just to put it in context for folks, I mean, this is months ahead. I mean, early March was when the Michigan primary was, and this is well out. I mean, this is more than 3 months, 4 months in advance of the election. You're out there in the snow doing live nativities, putting out signs, hanging out at buck poles. This is work up to 6 months and more before the election, and that's how they were able to have that misbalance as far as the more than 1 million. Was it more than 2 million cases spent, or more than 1 million?
2 million in 2 weeks, or a month or something. Yeah.
So that's how you go after spending $1,000 and getting all this in-kind and volunteer work versus those millions of dollars and still kick the snot out of them. And we talk a lot about this on the lower levels, state house and municipal and congressional, but those same principles, they translate onto the presidential side as well. But you've got to have somebody as like Wendy and volunteers as dedicated as they had in Michigan to make that happen, because this does not happen easily. It takes a lot of hard work and a little bit of freezing in the cold.
It does, and we loved it, and we had fun. I mean, we actually opened 8 volunteer offices too, in the fall. that were donated, completely donated.
Wow.
Everything was donated about them across the state of Michigan. We had more. We had at least as many offices, before Christmas in Michigan than Trump did a month before the election in Michigan, or maybe a couple months. But we had a very good ground game in Michigan, dedicated volunteers, and we made it fun. Like I said, it has to be fun, or nobody wants to do it.
What are some of the things you did to help make that fun for the volunteers? Because I'll tell you, as somebody who's lived in Michigan, there's not much fun about the kind of weather you guys were dealing with for those last few months.
I think just your tone and your enthusiasm can be catchy, and that goes both directions. And also, I think you just have to be creative and give people some autonomy to come up with their own ideas. So a lot of people try to micromanage every aspect of a campaign, but I've learned a long time ago that it might not be exactly the way I would do it, but if it's good enough, it's fine, and let it go and let them do it, because then they start to feel like they have a say in it. They start to feel like they have buy-in, and thanking them, and just letting them know that you appreciate them, and that they are, that they're the reason why you're being successful. That goes a long way. And sometimes we forget to do that. We're so busy trying to win, we forget to really thank those volunteers and build those relationships.
Well, one of the things that I've seen a lot in campaigns is they're very good, and they have whole departments dedicated to thanking donors and people that give big stuff. But oftentimes the volunteers, they get they're kind of the redheaded stepchildren. They do a lot of the work, and they may be why you win, but they don't get a lot of the recognition. And
right.
One of the things I liked about the Cruz campaign, and specifically about the parts of it that like you were running, is that volunteer recognition and thanking people and appreciating, like visibly appreciating the work and what they've sacrificed, was a core component of the campaign. Now, I think secondly, what you're talking about as far as that autonomy, the ability to go out there and have the latitude to make up your own plan, to just do something, that's not a widely used thing when it comes to presidential campaigns, and it's very, very stressful to campaign managers to give that kind of autonomy.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that's true. And the other thing that we did too, though, is recognizing, you give people small things to do to test kind of their skill level. And then, you don't just let them run off and do whatever they want. If you have a volunteer and they're really eager, have them do something small, because you're going to see if they follow through. You're going to see what their quality of work is. And then you can mentor them. If you look at that as mentoring them, you'll be in the right frame of mind. And if they follow through, you can elevate them and give them more responsibility. So the other thing that we did is we really tried to look at, again, what would work for different counties. Every county had to come up with a county plan, because every county was different. What would work in one county would not work in another county. And so we really let them do that. We let them, even the young people, we had a catching fire theme, not to infringe on trademark issues, but we took a catching fire thing and kind of did the underground renegade Mockingjay. Some of the kids at MSU did that, and we again, not everybody's going to go to the buck polls, but there were people who wanted to do that. It made sense in some counties to do that. So really meeting people where they're at, listening to what's going to work for their county, not acting like and I really did listen to them, because they're the ones that are up in these counties that I'm, maybe never been to, and they know what their neighbors need, and I'm going to trust them. And when you do that, they really respect that, and they go above and beyond because they want to please you and be part of something amazing. And it was such a blessing to watch that happen.
Getting buy-in from volunteers is oftentimes a really hard process, but when you let them have that autonomy to build their own plan, and you can scale it up like you talked about, from the small things to the much bigger things, but man, there's nothing that makes them have buy-in like letting them build the plan. And that's something that a lot of people know, but very few campaigns implement. So kudos to you guys for rolling that out and trusting your people.
Yeah, and it's scary to let control go. So
oh, yeah.
I wanted to say yes. Like everything that they wanted to do, I just said yes. As long as it was, again, legal, moral, ethical, and a quality idea, or else I try to shift it a little bit. But, I see pictures pop up on Facebook where we had a couple of volunteers go out and they just took it among them, on themselves to take the materials we'd given them, to go out to their local Farm and Fleet store and set up a table on a couple Saturdays and set pictures on Facebook. And, so they really took that seriously, that autonomy. The other thing that we did is we worked really hard on election day to have a extensive ground game where we had representatives at many polling locations across the state. And it was a great, huge effort. But again, all of our volunteers had been gearing up for this moment, and it allowed for a really nice, strong finish for us.
That's a pretty cool story. Well, good work to you guys. Y'all did a great job, and I think there's a lot that folks can learn from the way you guys did that.
Thanks.
Now, looking a little bit forward to what you're doing now through your company and the consulting stuff you do, what kind of products and services do you offer campaigns and organizations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do issue advocacy. We do campaign management. We do, if not all the campaign management, we'll help with specific things, whether it's some fundraising, PR work, again, volunteer management. I have been a trainer and an instructor actually at a community college for about 15 years in public speaking. So we've done training in how to work with the media and how to interact with the media, which is a skill set all on its own. So we've done a really wide range of training, and we have that experience that we offer to folks. Pretty much anything that you have to do in a campaign, we can help.
That's pretty cool. There's not many people that have that kind of public speaking training experience, and that's definitely something that you bring to the table for campaigns that a lot of people need, because many people are afraid of it, and a lot of folks think they do an all right job, but very few people do a great job at it. And I think that's one of those areas where anybody, regardless of the quality of their work, can constantly try to improve on that. Sure.
I agree with you. And I think, one of the things that I've loved the most in teaching public speaking is actually working with people who are afraid. And, one of the biggest mistakes politicians make, or candidates make especially, is that, they think they have to be interesting and not interested. And one of my core pieces of advice I'd give to any candidate is, throughout your entire campaign and throughout your entire public service, your goal is not to prove that you're interesting, but to be interested. And it doesn't really matter if people want you to do that 2-minute elevator speech, and that's fine. I found that going to the door saying, "Hi, I'm Wendy Day. I'm running for state representative. I'm wondering if you have any concerns about what's going on in our community or our country." And they might say, "Oh, no," but if you give it a second, let the silence sit for about, 3 seconds, then they come at you and they do have a concern.
Yeah.
And they're so happy to tell you about it. And all you have to do is figure out something that you can pull out of that you agree with them on, nod and smile. I agree. They'll love you forever because they feel listened to. So all that public speaking pressure a lot of times does come from the fact that we feel like we have to be interesting. Now, there are times when you do have to sell yourself, but to me, it's actually not even about selling yourself. It's about letting them know that you get them, you get where they're at. One of the key things that Trump has done is switched from saying I to we. I was waiting for that. I think Kelly Conway finally got to him and said, "Look, dude, no more I, because this is not about me. It's about you. It's about the people." You know what I mean? And their dreams and hopes and fears and concerns. So really, if you shift that whole dynamic, it just doesn't make you the center of the universe, and not everything rises and falls on who you are or who you're not.
That's a really good point. And I like that breakdown of interesting versus interested, because a lot of folks, when they go to that door, they want to tell them all about their whole life story, everything they care about, all their positions on all the issues.
And they're just giving them a reason not to vote for them.
Exactly.
Why would you do that? You're just going to keep listing crap till they're like, "I don't agree with that. Forget it. I'm not voting for you."
This is not a time to filibuster. You just came to my door. You're interrupting my day, and you won't stop talking. That's not a very good way to get me to like you and want to vote for you. But when you think about it, you think about the last time, especially in this crazy election cycle, when the last time was that somebody came up to you and genuinely asked you, "Wendy, what do you think about this?" And then actually let you have the breathing space to answer the question without interruption. And the truth is,
arguing with you about
it. Exactly. And they weren't going to argue with you about it. Right. It doesn't happen. And so when you're going door to door, you want to know the answer to those questions. You want to be interested in the responses, and you want to give them that time and space to think about it. and really ask them what they care about. Because I was actually talking to one of our state senators that I did some training with a couple years ago. I was talking with him on Saturday, and I said, Senator, I'm doing these classes. What are a couple of things that you think I ought to make sure I always tell these guys? And he said, without a doubt, he said, talk to them about the fact that it's more important that the voters like you than agree with you. And at the end of the day, when somebody goes in that voting booth, they're not going to remember your 10-point plan to lower the deficit or what you believe about some pipeline issue. They're going to remember whether they like you or not, whether they think you're a decent, good person. And if they do...
And how you made them feel.
Exactly. Yes, you're exactly right. And so if you've done a good job of making them feel that you were interested in them, that you've made them feel like you care about these things, and that you've communicated to them effectively what you're trying to there at the door, your chance of getting that vote go up very, very high.
They do. And also I think it's important, two things. Number one, I tell my clients, if you raise their blood pressure, you've lost it. If you do not argue with them. Politely don't even politely disagree. Nothing. Find an area. Like, I remember having a discussion, and I was on a school board for 4 years, and this woman was yelling at me, and all I kept saying to her, I agree that our children deserve really good education. I agree that our children deserve the best schools possible, because it's the only thing I could pull out of her position that I agreed with. But all she heard was, I agree with you. I agree with that, and it was legit and sincere, and I was able to do that because I never was going to be able to change her mind by arguing with her. And if you're trying to earn someone's vote, like I said, if you raise their blood pressure, you've lost them. You're never getting their vote. And it's best just to stop before you do. The other thing is, I would always go home that night and write a personal postcard. Towards the end, we had so many that I had some volunteers helping me write, and I'd add a personal note at the end or something. But we hand wrote postcards to everybody we talked to and popped them in the mail within the next two or 3 days. So they got hit with that, hit twice in a short period of time. And I try to write a little note, if they had a flag, or if they, we talked about a certain issue, or, if their kid was getting ready to go to a baseball game. Well, they may not be able to talk to me very long, but I sent them a follow-up postcard that said, hey, thanks for taking a minute to say hi. I hope your son had fun at his baseball game. And all of a sudden, I've remembered them. They're important to me, and they feel valued and listened to. And again, as a candidate, that's what you want to be sincerely feeling and thinking, because these are the people you're going to serve, but also accurately and effectively communicating to them.
Well, and that's where having a good software solution, in my case, I recommend Campaign Sidekick, something like that, where you're able to log this information back in there.
Exactly.
Because whether it's you, the candidate, or your volunteers, being able to have those post-interaction follow-ups and be able to make sure that down the line you're able to micro-target them or follow up for persuasion or get out the vote. That becomes a critical
facet. Or not go back to them. I mean, we had a couple of
absolutely.
dogs. You know what I mean? We had people that hated my guts. We had people we had a couple people. I had one guy that I walked down his driveway. It was down kind of a hill, and there was like big kind of ruts in his dirt driveway, and obviously needed to be graded. But I walked down there, parked at the top, walked down, and all of a sudden he walks by, and he's like literally in his underwear, like little underwear, and he turns and looks at me and like he freezes for a second, kind of like Sasquatch, and then like keeps going. And I just went, I just turned around and walked back up the hill, because I'm like, this is not going to be a good thing. And then I walked to, there was at least 3 or 4 folks that I knocked on their door, and the wife would answer, and I'd be like, hi, give him my spiel, and is there anything that you're concerned about? And she's like, oh, my husband really cares about politics, but he can't come to the door right now. He doesn't have any pants on, because these farmers would come in, peel their pants off, and go have lunch,
Oh my gosh.
And you never know what you're going to get, what you're going to run into. But those notes that you talked about, having that great data system to be able to kind of note some of those things, or note the important conversations. There was one guy that I sat with for an hour, which I don't advise this to my candidates, but his wife had just died, and he was really grieving. And I was able to comfort him. I ran to another door, and the guy's wife was in hospice, and I sent him a card when I saw that she died a few weeks later. But this one guy, George Bondi, I sat and talked with him for an hour. I had the experience because of my job, and he left me a message, and I had it for a long time saved on my phone, and I switched and I lost it. But he was in tears. He called me after the election and said, or no, he called me before and said, "This is George Bondi, and I want you to know that I am voting for you because you took the time to talk to me." And he and his son came to my election night party, actually. So it was, it's amazing. And I'm sure he told other people, you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
I didn't do it
I
to
bet
be
so.
insincere. I did it because I care about him, and you have to really care about people. If you're in it for any other reason than to serve and because you care about people, then, it's going to be a struggle.
Yeah, you shouldn't get into this line of work unless you actually care about people and the policy outcomes. I mean, you got to believe that you have a role to play in making their lives better, our country freer. And if you don't think that, if that's not at the core of who you are, then get out and stop listening to podcasts.
I know, right? Turn it off now.
Right. Don't learn anything else. We don't want to teach
Go buy
anything.
a car lot. No, just kidding.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
that's an awesome story. And like you said, you come up with some of the funniest and craziest stories out block walking than in any other area of politics. There's no doubt about it. But it can honestly be one of the most rewarding things that you ever do. I had during the primary, I was block walking in my precinct just down the street a couple blocks away, knocking doors, talking to folks about Ted. And I talked to this old Marine. He and his wife were there and just loved Ted. He was asking me questions, and he wanted a yard sign. I had one left, and so I went back and got it for him. And we spent a long time talking. And he'd come by, and anytime he'd see me down the street, he'd kind of hurry down and ask me how the campaign was going and everything. And just wonderful people. And you get some great stories. And frankly, especially this year, they were some of the most inspirational just to see some normal people and get their feedback about politics.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, and one of the things we did with the Cruz campaign, and I did on my campaign as well, is we did a lot of earned media. I know you mentioned at the beginning, and earned media is essential because it's free. And you need it. You need name recognition. You need to be relevant. You need to be looking like you're doing things. And I'll tell you a secret about my campaign when I ran. Not all of my events were successful. Like, some of them weren't publicized right. Sometimes just things go wrong, and sometimes it's just not a good turnout. It's not a good idea or not a good event. But we did the very best we could to make it the best it could be for the people that were there. We always took great pictures of people smiling. I didn't poo-poo it and go cry in the corner because it didn't work out well. I made the best of it, kept a smile on my face, took great pictures with people that were there, and put it on Facebook. So it looked like we were busy all the time. And so there's the earned media where you're really just tracking what you're doing, those selfies out walking, pictures with people. I've seen sometimes where candidates go overboard with that, though, and they're taking pictures with people they run into when they're out door knocking, and the people don't look very happy. And so I'm like, don't take that picture. And if you do, don't put it on Facebook. You want fun, interactive pictures of you and dogs, So there's a social media presence where you want to have a really high tempo drumbeat that you're out there and you're working it. You're hustling for those votes because donors, volunteers, supporters like to see someone who's working really hard. Now, the other kind of earned media is, media that's going to get you on your local radio station or your local your local newspaper, or even, can go nationally sometimes. And a couple of things that we've done that have been really noteworthy. One of them, actually, probably the most effective thing I've ever done to get earned media ended up, and my dad was like, well, obviously you're famous, because the story actually made it to the Weather Channel, Fox News, CNN. It was in, China and Europe. And, when you refresh
Wow.
those news hits, I mean, it was, the AP picked it up, and it was a snowman protest. We went out in 2010 in January. They were going to pass a tax hike in Michigan, and we built like 60 snowmen in the middle of the night, about 20 people. And we made these, and we used licorice, like black licorice, to make angry eyebrows and frowny faces. And we made like signs that said, raise our taxes when hell freezes over. And I leaked it to a couple of friendly reporters that we'd done it. But I went back the next morning to kind of see, and it was the talk of the town. It was like the most talked about protest ever, and it was just 60 snowmen, and
Wow.
and it cost us probably $15, to buy little, toasted coconut marshmallows for the nose and or for the eyes, and it was not that expensive, and we also did. When I ran for office, one of the things we did is my friend had this big pig. And I'm talking like a big fat pig. He calls him Mr. Perks. He's on the back of a trailer. I want to buy a Mr. Perks because there's just no substitute. If you go, I'm Wendy Lynn Day. If you go to my Facebook page and look around, my old campaign photos, there's pictures of this pig. And he's really big and tall. And we had that pig in parades. Everybody talked about Mr. Perks. And we actually parked him at a park and ride right off the freeway. And the Democrats filed a complaint and called the radio station, put out a press release that it was inappropriate for me to have my pig by the freeway. So it made this huge news story in our area about this pig that was he parked illegally? Was he not? And MDOT was getting me to move the pig, and I'm like, well, what's the law that he's violating? Well, it's just inappropriate. I'm like, but I know you don't like my pig, but what's the law? And and again, I wasn't nasty about it, even though I think they didn't have any basis for what they were saying. I don't want to create bad feelings, so I asked them a couple questions. I'm like, you know what? No problem, we'll move it. But it was a fantastic, that pig, man. And we moved him and parked him different places, and he was a lot of fun, Mr. Perks. And but not everything has to be that big, because most people don't have access to a 50-foot tall pig, or however tall he was. Probably not 50 feet, maybe like 25. I don't know. Anyway, he was big.
Wow.
I know, it was fun. But let me give you an example of what else you can do. So let's say you're doing issue advocacy, and we have a really strong teachers union in Michigan that has been pretty mean to people over the years, and they like to bully school boards. And they were bullying a little school board in like 2011 in this little town, and we were beyond the point where you could just bring together hundreds and hundreds of people for a rally, and that's not really effective anyway, and it's hard work. And but what we did is we went out and we rented like 6 costumes from the costume shop, like Barney, Cookie Monster, Big Bird, a couple other guys. And I made signs for everybody, and Cookie Monster had a sign that said, me like cookies, me no like MEA bullies. And every one of them had a sign that kind of matched who they were, but also addressed the issue of the MEA being bullies. And we shut that town down. I mean, people were like talking about it all over the place, and it was an amazing, cheap stunt that was very, very effective. So I
love your creativity. These are just great.
It's fun. I mean, it's really fun. And one thing I did learn is it's really hard to duplicate things. So it's kind of one and done if you come up with a really great idea. I mean, you could duplicate it in different parts of the state, but it's hard. Sometimes that magic is just magic for that season. But even our live nativity, we put out a press release about freedom of religion, and we always tied it back to an issue. If you're going to do a stunt, again, you have to make sure, especially as a candidate, that anything you put on social media or anything you do, to the best of your ability, can't be used to make you look foolish later. And I'm always aware of that for myself, and I'm always encourage other people to keep that in mind when you're doing a stunt of whatever kind you're doing. And also, it should always be tied to like a policy or a principle that you're trying to convey. Because a stunt, just for stunt's purpose, I don't think you might get a little media attention, but it's not going to be as effective. I mean, the last stunt I'll tell you that was last January. We knew there was a problem in Flint. And people were kind of talking about it, but none of the presidential campaigns were talking about it. And I like to help. I like to go and get in, get my hands dirty and help. So we got our volunteers from Livingston County. We gathered up 600-gallon jugs of water, put on our Ted Cruz sweatshirts and Ted Cruz hats that we had made, and drove to Flint to deliver that water. And we put out a press release. Actually, we didn't put out a press release right away, but we tipped off the media because we gave it to pregnancy helpline centers. And so that those unborn babies could be sure to have good water. And that made the liberals mad, which was kind of funny, and it got picked up as a national story because of that. So for the price of 600 gallons of water and a few hours of our time, we actually ended up going to a homeless shelter, going to a government housing unit, and of course the pregnancy help centers, and we're able to really have an impact on the folks there, give Senator Cruz really good press, and offer relatively cheap.
Well, those are fantastic stories when it comes to how to generate some earned media, and especially on the stunt side. I love the creativity because that's definitely not my strong suit. I can help on the execution, but those are some just wonderful ideas. Moving on over to talking about how you develop your message strategy. A lot of campaigns, we talk to folks about really working through the what we call the 3 whys. Why are you running? Why this office? And why are you the right man or woman for this job? And being able to use those whys to start laying the groundwork for what becomes the message they want to convey to the voters. Mm-hmm. So talk to me a little bit more about how you walk your clients through building out their message strategy and how you craft their message.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's kind of a 3-step process. I do actually ask maybe, those why questions. Why are you running for office? What are you hoping to do there? And so I can hear their heart, and what they're really after. And then the next question really that I'm looking for is, or the next, thing that I go through. Let me start that over again. Yeah, so there's a 3-step process that I go through with my clients. And one of them is asking that basic why. Why are you running for this office at this time? What do you want to do when you get into that office? Because it's important to see into their heart, kind of what's really in their gut that's driving them to do this right now. And there's not really a right or wrong answer. I mean, maybe there's a wrong answer, but mostly I just want to find out kind of where they're at and what they're about. The second thing that we do is through the Leadership Institute, they do that Leesburg grid where you kind of look at, what you want to say about what we want people to think about you, what we want people to think about your opponent, what your opponent wants people to think about them, what your opponent wants people to think about you.
Yeah,
and
the simple message matrix.
Exactly. And try to get those messages kind of lined up so that we are either obviously framing our candidate or framing their opponent. And the third, I think, most important thing is looking at what people care about. Because, you may be running because you want to get a stop sign at this corner, or you want to, get rid of this little loophole in the tax law. Well, people don't care about that, right? I mean, that's okay. Do that when you get there, as long as it's not completely in opposition of what your constituents would want. Then you probably should tell them or not run. But typically, you want to speak to people about what they care about and find a need, meet a need. And again, that's where it comes to listening, doing a lot of listening, understanding that, when you're working on your messages, people don't care about the 10-point plan. You could put some of that on your website, but they don't care about it. They don't want to hear about it. And if they do, they'll ask questions, but nobody cared about that. They want to know that you get them, that you care about them, that you're sincere, relatable, and that you're going to do the best job you can when you're in office. And that's really what they care about. So you can go off ranting about an issue for 10 minutes, but then find out that they really care about issue B, and you didn't even talk about that. So again, I think it's really finding out what's important in your area, what the hot issues are, and your messaging. Really, you can have your core principles, but again, you can keep them kind of broad, so that you can adapt them to what's going on within your community and state as the election goes. Because the reality is, what's being talked about right now might not be talked about in 6 months to a year. And elections these days are, a year, 2 years long. So you have to have that broad framework of principles that you're going to stand on. And, when I talked about earlier about dealing with the media, and this helps with that too, because when I was working, when I ran for office, when I was talking about debates or speeches or the media, I had basically 4 general principle talking points that I would talk about. And I knew what they were because they were my gut. That's what I felt. That's what I cared about. They weren't detailed plans, but they were principles, and that were important. And I found that any time I was talking to a reporter, I could usually circle back to one of those 3 or 4 talking points. That's all I talked about. Every debate came back to one of those. And I'll give you a really quick example of that. When I did my announcement when I was running for office. I was going on a radio show in Detroit. Frank Beckman, who's great. I've known him for a while. But when I went to go on the show, he had a substitute host who actually was going to bump me. And I'm like, I like put this out in a press release, whatever. Please don't bump me. And he didn't, but he didn't know me. So he gets on and he's like, talks to me for a second. He literally says, well, you sound like you're smart. Stay on the line and we'll talk about a couple issues when we come back. I'm like, okay. So we come back and what he wants to talk about is energy policy, because that's what he cared about. And I'm like, he's asking me about all these things, and I didn't know a lot about what he was talking about. I mean, I'm talking about other issues, schools, military, safety, that kind of thing. He's talking about energy policy and, plants being built on the west side of the state, all this stuff. My point is, I was able to bring back a broad issue of free market capitalism, of allowing competition to drive that market, of making sure the government wasn't picking winners and losers, and that, yes, energy can be diversified as the market dictates. And by being able to share that general principle of free market capitalism and letting the markets dictate what happens and not picking winners and losers, those are overarching principles that can be applied to pretty much any topic that you get asked about. And he thought I was a genius. And my brother-in-law called me and said, you sounded so smart on the radio. It was great. I was like, good.
Well, and that could have turned into a nightmare scenario very quickly. I mean, you're not going into a known audience. I mean, this is supposed to be your campaign announcement with a familiar, friendly host. And instead, you're getting somebody who doesn't even know who you are or whether you're smart until you start talking to them. And then they're throwing you questions that you don't know, that you haven't talked about ahead of time. This is, for a lot of people, that could have been a nightmare scenario. But because you actually put the work into knowing what you want to go back to, knowing where you needed to pivot, you're able to do a great job and kick things off well.
That's right. And having those talking points will save you every time when you come up against an issue or an unexpected situation. You just go back to those, circle back at every question you circle back to one of your principles.
Yeah, I mean, it truly is pivoting. I mean, when you get asked a question or you get drawn into a conversation about something you don't want to talk about, what you do is you plant your feet and give her whatever kind of response you have to give in the near term, and then you shift as quickly as possible over to where you want to be and where you're comfortable.
Yeah, I used to teach interviewing, actually, and I explained it kind of like you did, but using the illustration of tennis. If an interview is a tennis match. They're going to serve up a ball and volley it over to you, and you're going to try to hit it back. But if you're expecting a tennis ball and they, throw a four-square ball over, and you're like, what's this big red thing coming at me? You're not obligated to try to hit that thing. It's not going to go well. Stop, put it down, pick up a tennis ball, and hit that back to them, because that's the game you're playing. And if you look at it that way, you really have more control over the flow of that interview than just kind of having to respond every time to whatever they throw at you. And again, if you have your 3 or 4 main principles that you believe in, you can always pivot back to one of those quickly, and then move forward with the interview and talk about something you want to talk about.
I agree 100%. Now, let's kind of move on to talking, or let's pivot here, to talking about how you prepare for debates, because a lot of people get scared of those, and they really don't know where to go. You alluded to it a little bit when you're talking about those 4 points you kept moving back to. But how do you approach debate preparation, and what should people do in the days leading up to that?
I think it's important just to know where you stand. I'll give you like a research answer, and then I'll give you like an actual prep answer. I think you should have a really good and snappy introduction and conclusion. And it should really be not about I. Don't use the word I. If you are giving speeches and a candidate and you're using the word I in your emails and your letters and your speeches, you're doing it wrong. This is not about you. It's about them. It's about you identifying with them, what they deserve, what they need, how you want to serve and help them. And that should be your introduction and conclusion. When it comes to issues that you might be asked about, these debate issues are not anything that's surprising. They may ask watch the local paper. There's going to be hot issues. If there's Democrat paper that's, doing the debate, they'll ask you about abortion, So you want to have some of those hot button issues you want to have answers on, gay marriage, abortion, pot legalization. I know those were all issues that came up. And then you want to have your philosophical answers that can apply to pretty much everything else. So that's kind of the research, and you don't want to write down all your answers. I know people did that. I just think you end up reading your cards, and that's just really bad form. I do think you can write down your intro and your conclusion, but they should be 22 font, double spaced, so that you can read them without picking up the paper. And then what I think you should do, what I did and what I encourage people to do, is read that statement at least 10 times. And only one of them really should be with the paper in front of you. You should try to recall it, remember it, say it out loud 10 times when you're in the shower, when you're driving, whatever, so you feel comfortable saying the words. And it's the same thing for your positions. If you know you're going to be asked about certain things, work on that position, say it out loud at least 10 times, talk through it, because by that 10th time, you're going to be like, okay, now I get it. Instead of blurting it out during the debate, and all the drive home, you're doing the other 9 times. And by the 10th time, you're like, that's what I should have said. We want to get you to, that's what I should have said before you even go to the debate. And there's no substitute for saying it out loud. You need to be able to hear the words as you're saying them, feel comfortable saying it. Repetitiveness. Most good public speakers have given that same speech, 100 times. Mm-hmm. So no wonder they're good at it. So if you can do 10, 15, 20 times of saying that out loud, those little answers, then you're going to be very comfortable when you get there and with what you're saying, and be very conversational in your style and relatable, which is exactly what you need to be.
One thing that I found as I've started doing more public speaking myself is that when I'm writing stuff out, that I found that I write and I speak in a very different voice. And yes. what that's meant for me is that when I'm typing something up or I'm writing something out, that as I start to read back through that, I figure out, whoa, this is not how I speak at all. And so what I've done is I've adapted both the way I'm writing for my speeches, but I've also learned how to go back through that and edit. And I think a lot of candidates, they really need to start recognizing the difference between those voices. And if you don't do a whole lot of that reading through and practicing, you're not going to catch those subtle differences, and you're going to come off sounding very scripted and very bland as a result.
Yeah, your script for you, if you do choose to type out your introduction and conclusion, that's for you only. If you need to make notes on that, run-on sentences are fine because that's how we speak. You don't need complete sentences because that's not how we speak. So again, I think you're right. If you could do a keyword kind of to prompt you if you practice it enough. But if you want to, if you just want to make sure you nail the beginning and the end, you can type it out. But make sure you type it the way that you talk. Don't talk the way that you type, which I think is what you're saying, Raz.
Absolutely. No, you're 100% right on that. So, Wendy, what most excites you about working in politics? This is not a very morale-friendly business, and it's not an easy one to survive in. You've definitely taken a lot of lumps and come through as a happy warrior. What excites you about being in this battle?
I think it's a combination of things. I do believe, again, we're a military family, and I remember standing on the Capitol steps and telling people that, we're the defenders of the American Constitution. And we're at such a crucial time in our country, a time such as this, that we've been put here on this earth. And I've always been passionate about having a mission bigger than myself. And I believe in people. I'm an optimist about people. I believe people have it within themselves to have self-determination and to make it if the government would get out of the way and stop trying to quote unquote help them. And so, this combination of patriotism, of really believing in people and wanting them to have the opportunity to pursue their American dream, understanding the cost of freedom. For me, it's not about just having a title or anything like that. It really truly is about trying to change culture and to make our country and our world a better place because of it. And I believe in America. I believe America is a wonderful vehicle to make the world a better place. So that's why I'm in it. And again, because I have that as my focus, politics is not easy. I mean, you will get beat down, kicked around, disappointed, backstabbed. It will be hard. You'll make mistakes. I mean, you learn, you move on. And as long as you're a happy warrior, like you said, as long as you lose well, because you're going to lose sometimes. And as long as you lose well, meaning you have dignity and remember that, you're not going to rant about it on Facebook, as long as you maintain your happy warrior, at least overall, then I think that you can pretty much get through anything. And I like being a part of that. I like the game of it. I like the strategy behind it. I like the competition. I'm very competitive. So all of it, I like all of it. I don't love I think politics, one thing I've learned about it is that, water is water, steam, and ice, right? It could be any of those three things, but it's still the same thing. Politics is 100% personal relationships. It's 100% strategy and how you're going to play that game, if you will, and it's 100% principle, where you're standing. And what I have found that when groups are dysfunctional or people are dysfunctional, they're out of balance in one of those areas. They lean, one way, towards, they ditch personal relationships in the name of principle and kind of jerks for, Jefferson or Jesus, or they lean way too far to the personal relationships and they forego their principles, or they're all about the strategy at the detriment to the other two. And I think finding that happy medium between relationships, principle, and strategy is the sweet spot that I'm still working on finding and staying in. And I think that's the struggle that all of us who are going to be in politics long term in any role, we have to do that and find that sweet spot and fight to stay there.
I love that analogy. One of the things we talked about before we came on was that you're actually in the process of writing a book right now. And I'd love for the listener to hear a little bit more about that.
I am. I'm really excited about it. Actually, I started it a while ago because I, was looking around at these campaigns and folks who run campaigns, and a lot of them are young men and women, and it's because they can, they just have a lot more free time and can work for pizza and beer and a couple bucks here and there. But I also found that in my organization here in Michigan, as we were working in this team that came together, we had so many women who were moms. Even in the Tea Party, many of the Tea Party groups were run by moms. And I don't think moms are better than the young folks, but I think that sometimes the young folks tend to be intimidated by moms. They don't know what to do with them. They're not sure they offer anything or what that's going to mean. And so I really wanted to start to explore what skills that we bring, because I'm a mom of 4, what skills we bring as moms that can enhance and help any campaign. And I think that any campaign can use a good mom on the campaign, because we're going to be able to do things, look at things differently, and work very efficiently. We don't have to work as long to get things done all the time because we're so used to doing things efficiently and multitasking. And so I'm starting to interview women across the country, moms and women who maybe not be moms, but women who are in politics, to find out what their experience has been, what they've worked on in their campaigns, and the differences that they've seen, the skills that they've learned being a woman, a mom, that are, really going to help in the world of campaigns and has helped in the campaigns they've worked on.
Well, I'm excited to read that. That's a pretty cool take on a very unique political niche. And as somebody that's had a lot of moms working on campaigns that I've been a part of, they bring a very unique and important value set. Where can folks find you online in order to continue this conversation and connect to you and see if they can get some help from you?
Sure. forabetterday.com, FOR, a better day.com. I'm also on Facebook under Wendy Lynn Day, or I have another page, Wendy Day, and Twitter, Wendy Lynn Day. Find me, follow me, send me a message. My email is wendyday1776@gmail.com. I'm happy to help. I'm happy to mentor people, and I'm very good at brainstorming and giving ideas. So if you need something, let me know. And for the cause of liberty, I'm here to serve.
Well, I appreciate being on today, Wendy. It's been a wonderful conversation. It's taught me quite a bit, and I know that it's taught the listeners a lot as well. I'll definitely be having all that content information in the show notes so folks can reach out. And I encourage you guys, definitely reach out to the folks that are coming on the podcast. They have a heart to serve. They want to help teach you guys, and they're always looking forward to hearing from listeners. So take advantage of that, both from Wendy and our other guests. Be looking for the show notes for more information about this podcast and all the content information. And I'll look forward to talking to you guys again next week. Don't forget to like our Facebook page, subscribe to the podcast, and any kind of friendly reviews and ratings would be much appreciated. We'll catch you guys later.
Please subscribe and rate us on iTunes to help spread the word. We'll be back with you next week with more campaign insights from My Campaign Coach.